Hello everyone. I hope you're keeping well. I am dealing with a storm warning in my area. It's going to start today with freezing rain and then snow. I think it's going to be about something like 5 or 10 centimeters of snow, which is not much really, but yeah, it's going. It's probably the um, first large snowfall of the season. So yeah, it'll you just have to be careful on roads and everything. So, yeah, let's get started with the highlights today. First one by from 4,000 weeks. The general principle in operation is one you might call the efficiency trap. Rendering yourself more efficient either by implementing various productivity techniques or by driving yourself harder won't generally result in the feeling of having enough time. Because all else being equal, the demands will increase to offset any benefits. Far from getting things done, you'll be creating new things to do. Right. There is, I think this is plenty clear. It is, it is not something that we usually think will happen. We always have this hope that just if we just work harder, if we just work a little bit harder, we'll get everything done and then we'll relax. But that's the trap. That's the paradox. That's not going to happen. And I think it's plenty clear. So let's move on. Range. Dropping one's tools is a proxy for unlearning, for adaptation, for flexibility. Weak wrote. I hope I'm pronouncing correctly. It could be Vike or Vic, I'm not sure. It is the very unwillingness of people to drop their tools that turns some of these dramas into tragedies. And there is another quote in this book, this and another book, I Think Again, that dropping one's tools is an existential crisis. And there is this incident of, a few firefighters battling a forest fire. And there was a section where they had to retreat and they were climbing a slope. And for surviving, they had to drop all of their tools and run. But they couldn't, you know, uh, unfortunately, most of them perished in that fire. And the takeaway was that it's so hard to drop someone's tools because if I drop my tools, if I drop my capabilities, who am I? And this highlight what we're seeing over here. Dropping one's tools is a proxy for unlearning. That we are ready to learn something new. We are not tied into muscle memory or the comfort zone. We are unlearning, we are adapting for flexibility. That is what we need to survive. It is the very unwillingness of people to drop their tools that turns some of these dramas into tragedies. It's referring to the forest fire. This was mentioned in this book as well. So when I first read this, it was very impactful. Now, of course, I've read this in multiple places, multiple books. It's kind of okay. I know this now, but when I first read this, it was so what's the word, I mean, I could identify readily with that. And yeah, it's important to drop one's tool. And it's a like it says, it's a proxy for unlearning. It shows that okay, you're ready to learn something new. And we'll move on. A mind for numbers. One of the best things you can do to not only remember but understand concepts in math and science is to create a metaphor or analogy for it. Often the more visual the better. I think this is plenty clear. Again, it shows the importance of metaphors, analogies, and how it helps in understanding. There is a similar note in I think range. I'm not sure, but I think range where it was talking about Kepler's ability to draw up analogies, and it was mirroring that the number of analogies he came up with in his entire career, and mapping it with his success as well. So I think that's in range, but let's move on for now. The voltage effect. Quitting on something means not knowing exactly what will come next. This is so challenging for us because of a cognitive bias that behavioral economists call ambiguity aversion. This quirk in our thinking causes us to overly favor the known over the unknown, even if the known leads you or your enterprise to disastrous voltage drop. This is why tolerance for uncertainty is important, not just when throwing your time and resources into something, it's also necessary for pulling the plug. In this book, The Voltage Effect, there are like five effects that stops your scaling, and then there were a few factors that are required that help in scaling, and quitting early is one of those factors that helps you in scaling. So this this highlight, I mean, again, it's quite straightforward, but what really intrigued me in this highlight was the how it links up to ambiguity aversion. Because when we quit, we don't know what we'll do. Because in our minds we are thinking about quitting, not about starting something else. That's what happens when we usually think of quitting. If we are thinking about starting something else, it's we usually don't. So if we have a project and we want to start a new project, our mind space is occupied by the new project, not about quitting the old project. We may not even think of it as quitting an old project. It would just be, something like one of those projects that have fallen by the wayside. It would be something like that. But if you think of quitting, the label, when we put this, that okay, I'm going to quit this project, there is this essentially this ambiguity, and it's often unconscious. We don't really think completely through it, but there is this ambiguity, and we, like, for our own safety, our brains try to avoid it. And how do you avoid it? By making you by by making you resist change. So that's the aversion of um, ambiguity, and like that translates into aversion to quitting. And like the highlight says, tolerance for uncertainty is important for that reason. We'll move on. Okay, this, I think, it's a tweet. So like I said, Readwise also collects tweets. I'm going to skip it. Remote, not distant. Don't rush to provide a solution, just listen. People can learn more from their own experience than from your advice. Processing past events help us reflect on what we can do better next time. It shows importance of listening, and I think this falls under the chapter of coaching. So sometimes, when we are managing, mentoring, or coaching someone, uh, we tend to rush towards a solution. Or there is another version, if you're coaching, like one of the aspects of coaching is that you never provide a solution, in fact, for mentorship as well. But especially in coaching, it's very, very clear, if you're coaching somebody, you're not going to provide a solution, you're going to walk them through the solution. So sometimes, providing a solution is one thing, but even getting them to walk the path to the solution, sometimes we may jump on that, and that may not be the need of the moment. People sense that, people know what you're doing. They are not they are smart. So the highlight is just listen. Sometimes it's just listening and acknowledging what they're going to say. You don't have to accept it, you just have to acknowledge what they're saying and make people feel heard. uh, and really listen. Intentional listening, because if you're not intentionally listening, again, that shows. You may think that, okay, you're getting away with it. No, but the other person knows that you're not listening. You're just bearing them, and that's not a good feeling. So yeah, if you want to build that engagement within your teams, that perform, the high performing teams need engagement. So if you want to build that engagement within teams, sometimes you just have to listen. We'll move on. Get it done. The phrase "shoot the messenger" captures our reluctance to congratulate those who deliver bad news, including ourselves. This phrase originated in ancient Greece, which goes to say that the tendency to punish bad news isn't a modern phenomenon. I think there's not much for me to say over here, and like, based on some feedback, I'm just going to kind of skip certain highlights. I'll just skip this one today. Another one from Get It Done. The lesson we learn from negative feedback, whether it's that we have low commitment or lack of progress, will therefore determine its effect on motivation. When people interpret negative feedback as a sign of low commitment, they give up. When they interpret it as a sign of a lack of progress, they're motivated to work harder. So this plays along with the intent of feedback. And then I often say, that okay, you may want to be radically candid and you may want to share the feedback, but what is your intention in sharing your feedback? especially this is especially true in cases of negative feedback, because again we learn from this book, and many other pieces of literature, that negative feedback doesn't necessarily help somebody. So again, there are a lot of different criteria. For example, if it's like, if they're an expert, and negative feedback may actually help them, because that's what they're looking for, because it doesn't show the lack of commitment, it just shows lack of progress, like the highlight map points out over here. But if it's a sign of low commitment, if somebody's just beginning with some project, some task, and it's a new area for them, and they are not certain themselves that if they will be any good at it, and if you share negative feedback, it may come across as showing lack of commitment on their part, and they give up. So again, it all comes back to this: what is your intention in giving feedback? Is it something that you need to get off your chest? Then you're not doing, and you're not helping anybody, you're not helping yourself, you're not helping the other person, because most likely they'll give up, and your project will not get done. So it's not helping anybody. So sometimes that need to vent, that doesn't help you. Maybe vent in silence, and actually there are other studies that venting doesn't really help anybody anyway. So I mean, that's a whole different discussion. But if you're sharing feedback with the need of venting, then you're not helping anybody really. So yeah, figure out why you're giving feedback. What is the end result that you want, and then share feedback accordingly, because negative feedback is not something that may help anybody at all. It's all context dependent. It depends on your situation. So um, if it's early, if it's a new thing for that person, it may be better idea to not share negative feedback in a very straightforward manner. Let's move on. 4,000 weeks. The real measure of any time management technique is whether or not it helps you neglect the right things. Um, Again, I won't say much about this, but it points towards the idea of prioritization. It's not about doing everything, it's about prioritizing the right things and dropping everything else. We'll move on. The Almanack of Naval Ravikant. Naval Ravikant. I'm not sure how he pronounces the name. And it's a supplemental highlight, so I'm not going to spend much time on it. I'll just read it. Intentions don't matter, actions do. That's why being ethical is hard. Okay, so I think that's the end of the highlights today. And based on certain feedback, I took it a little slow. I also skipped highlights. I think going forward, I'll skip more and more highlights this way. And how it's working out for you, please do let me know. And have a good day.